So let's talk about something that's been slowly building. Off camera, behind the headlines, in the quiet spaces between games. And now, it's getting ready to erupt right in front of us. Patience.
I've never been a patient person my entire life, so this has definitely tested me a little bit.
Not exactly the sexiest word in sports, right? It doesn't come with highlight reels. It doesn't light up the scoreboard. It's not the stuff that goes viral on social media. Patience doesn't get the roar of the crowd or make SportsCenter's top 10, but it does shape champions. It builds dynasties, and in this case, for Caitlin Clark and for Indiana Fever fans all over the country, it might just be the most important weapon of all. Because after weeks of sitting, watching, healing, learning, growing, that patience is about to pay off in a massive way. And no, I'm not just talking about Caitlin checking back into a game, jogging onto the court to a polite standing ovation while a graphic flashes, "She's back." That's not what this is. This is bigger. This is about momentum, identity. A team finding itself in her absence, a player redefining her role from the sideline, a league that suddenly had to realize what life without its biggest star actually looks like, and why they can't afford to take her for granted. What happened? While Caitlin Clark was off the court, isn't just a footnote or a subplot, it is the main story. Her absence didn't just stall momentum, it created new narratives. It forced Indiana to evolve, it exposed flaws across the league, and it revealed just how much weight Caitlin actually carries, not just for her team, but for the entire sport. We've seen viewership dip. We've seen matchups lose their shine. We've seen media spin desperately trying to fill the void. But through it all, one thing became crystal clear. This league hits different when Caitlin Clark is playing. So yeah, while the outside world might have moved on to the next trending headline, something powerful was brewing just under the surface. The Fever were adjusting, Caitlin was regrouping, the WNBA was recalibrating. And now it's time to release everything that's been building. But before we jump headfirst into what this return means, what it sets up, and how it could completely alter the trajectory of this season and the league as a whole, do me a favor. If you believe Caitlin, Clark's return is about to set viewership records, drop a like. If you think the Indiana Fever are just getting started, hit that subscribe button. Because we're not just watching a comeback, we're watching a transformation. Take a deep breath. Lock in, let's rewind. Let's go back to where it all started, because to understand why Caitlin Clark's return means so much, you have to remember the storm she walked into. Caitlin didn't just enter the WNBA as a rookie, she came in as a movement, fresh off one. Of the most legendary college careers in basketball history, men's or women's, Caitlin Clark didn't arrive quietly. She stepped into the league with the spotlight already blinding. This wasn't just a new chapter, it was a seismic moment. For the WNBA, the expectations? Astronomical. She was the NCAA's all-time leading scorer, a back-to-back National Player of the Year, the face of NIL deals, the name on every billboard, in every sports debate, on every social feed. She wasn't just highly anticipated, she was the most hyped player to ever step into a WNBA jersey. And that jersey, it wasn't a championship contender's, it was Indiana's. The Fever had been stuck in the basement for years, struggling for wins, struggling for identity, struggling for attention. They were a team looking for hope. And in Caitlin Clark, they found more than that. They found a reason to believe. The second she stepped on the court, things changed. Ticket prices doubled, triple. Entire arenas sold out, on the road. Cities that hadn't seen a WNBA sellout in decades were suddenly scrambling for seats. Viewership surged into record-breaking territory. Every highlight went viral. Every post-game interview made headlines. Caitlin Clark wasn't just a rookie, she was the economy of the league. And to her credit, she was delivering. Step-back threes from the logo, no-look dimes, cross-court lasers. She was playing with the same confidence, vision, and swagger that made her a legend in college. And while the WNBA game was faster, more physical, more disciplined, she was adjusting. Sure, the Fever weren't winning every game. Let's be honest, they weren't great yet. Even with Caitlin on the floor, the offense looked disjointed. The ball stuck. Rotations were slow. There were defensive breakdowns. It was clear this was a young team still figuring out how to gel, how to close games, how to win. But there was one thing keeping them competitive, night in and night out. Caitlin Clark's gravity. Defenders picked her up 30 feet from the hoop. Teams built entire scouting reports around stopping her. She stretched the floor in ways most guards just don't. And even when she wasn't scoring, she was bending the defense, opening space for teammates, creating opportunities through sheer presence. She gave Indiana relevance. Even in losses, people were tuning in. The Fever were now a team worth watching because Caitlin was on the court, but underneath all of that, the highlights, the headlines, the hype, there were signs that something wasn't quite right. The explosiveness wasn't always there. The burst to the rim looked a little hesitant. She was still effective, still impactful, but the rhythm? A little off. Some chalked it up to rookie adjustment. Others saw something deeper. Then came the announcement. Quad strain. Caitlin Clark would be out at least 4 games. And just like that, the league's biggest star went dark. It wasn't just a loss for the Fever, it was a shockwave across the WNBA. And for Indiana, a team still trying to find itself, it wasn't just about missing shots. It was about missing direction, leadership, identity. Because while the pieces were there, it was Caitlin who connected them. And without her, everything changed. The quad strain, 2 words that changed everything, at least for a moment. When the Indiana Fever announced that Caitlin Clark would miss time with a quad injury, the reaction was immediate. Fans gasped, analysts paused. The WNBA held its breath. Because this wasn't just any player going down, this was the engine of the league's momentum, the heartbeat of its most-watched season in 2 decades. Let's call it what it was, a shock. And not because players don't get hurt. They do. This is professional basketball. It's physical, demanding, relentless. But this player, this early in the season, that was different. It wasn't just a setback. It was a ripple effect. Caitlin was expected to miss at least 4 games. Not a season-ending blow, sure, but for a league running full speed on her stardom, 4 games felt like forever. For the Fever, it was a turning point. For the fans, it was unsettling. And for the media, it raised questions that no one was really ready to answer. First came the concern, was it more serious than they were letting on? A quad strain can mean a lot of things. A tweak, a tear, something you bounce back from in a week, or something that lingers for months. The Fever's medical team didn't offer much detail. Caitlin herself was vague, calling it something that happened early in the Liberty game, but unable to pinpoint the exact play. That only added fuel to the speculation, because if you'd been watching closely over the past few games, you probably saw it coming. She wasn't moving quite the same. The burst wasn't there. The lift on her jumper was flatter. She was still, producing because she's that talented, but something was clearly off. And suddenly, fans and analysts started connecting the dots. Was Caitlin playing hurt this whole time? Was this quad strain a freak mid-game accident, or the final straw in a stretch where she was gutting through pain? And if so, why was she allowed to keep playing? That's where the real questions began. Because if the Fever knew she was hurting, if they were aware of any early signs and still let her go out there night after night, it doesn't just reflect on medical decisions. It reflects on how this league manages its most valuable asset. Let's not sugarcoat it. Caitlin Clark is worth hundreds of millions to the WNBA this season alone. Her impact on ticket sales, merchandise, broadcast deals, and digital reach is unparalleled. She's not just a player, she's the centerpiece of an entire league-wide rebrand. So if it turns out she was playing through injury, pushing her body to maintain that spotlight, the optics aren't great, and they open a much bigger conversation about pressure, expectations, and player protection in a league that's still learning how to handle superstardom on this level. Now, to be clear, there's no confirmed evidence of negligence. No one from the Fever or Caitlin's camp has said she was playing hurt before the Liberty game. But the theory that this wasn't a sudden injury, but a slow-building issue, has gained real traction. And honestly, it makes sense. Because athletes like Caitlin, driven, competitive, relentless, are the types to push through discomfort. They don't want to sit. They don't want to disappoint. And if you followed her career, you know she's not wired to slow down. She's wired to grind. So maybe she felt it tightening up. Maybe she ignored the early signs. Maybe she told herself, just get through this game, then I'll rest. Until she couldn't. If that's what happened, it's hard to blame her. That's who she is. But it does beg the question, who's responsible for protecting her from herself? Because in a league riding her wave, someone needs to be the adult in the room. Someone needs to recognize when the show must pause for the sake of long-term health. Fortunately, it seems like that's what finally happened. She was shut down. Rest was prioritized. Rehab began. And from the outside at least, it appears that no further damage was done. But the narrative had already shifted. What began as a minor injury had become something more. A lens through which we saw the Fever differently. Through which we saw Caitlin differently. And through which the entire league's infrastructure was now being scrutinized. And while all of that was swirling, something else was happening behind the scenes. The Fever still had games to play, and without Caitlin on the court, everything they had built, the attention, the confidence, the early spark, was suddenly at risk. Would they fall apart? Would they spiral? Or would something unexpected happen? Games with Caitlin on the court are sold out weeks in advance. Resale prices have tripled. The cheapest seats, once $7 or $8, are now pushing $80 to $100 for prime matchups. And it's not just Indiana. Every single road game where Caitlin is scheduled to appear, same story. Sellouts, spike in resale demand, stadiums pulling back the curtains to open upper decks. Markets that haven't cared about the WNBA in decades are suddenly checking Fever schedules just to see when Caitlin's coming to town. Let me give you a perfect example. The Fever's first matchup with the Chicago Sky, huge numbers. Packed, house, major buzz. But the rematch, just a few weeks later, without Caitlin, ticket prices dropped as low as $3. That's not a typo. It was literally more expensive to buy a small popcorn than it was to get into the game. The optics of that? Brutal. Then came the announcement that Caitlin might return for the next rematch. And wouldn't you know it, ticket prices skyrocketed again. As of now, seats for that game are starting around $80 and climbing. That's a 2,500% increase, driven by one player. That's not just hype, that's economic reality. Caitlin Clark is close to coming back, and when she does, it won't just be a return to action, it'll be the moment everything changes again. Because here's the truth, the first version of Caitlin we saw this season, as good as it was, and it was good. It probably wasn't even her at 100%. That's the scary part. If you go back and watch the first few games, you'll notice something. The highlights were there, the step-back threes, the dimes, the swagger. But the explosion, the speed off the dribble, the bounce in her movements, it looked dulled, subtle, but there. And then the injury came, the quad strain. That moment didn't come out of nowhere. It felt like a build-up, like she'd been grinding through pain. And now, after time off, after rest, after treatment, we're about to see Caitlin Clark unleashed. During her media availability, Caitlin was clear. She didn't sugarcoat anything. She admitted she hates missing games, hates being off the court. But she also made something else clear. I feel like I've made a lot of progress. I feel good, but I'm not going to rush coming back. It's just not worth it. That's not someone dragging themselves across the finish line. That's someone reloading. Someone who's locked in, someone who knows the stakes and is choosing. The long game over a temporary spark. She's taking care of her body, making sure the foundation is strong, not just for one comeback, but for an entire season. Maybe even a run deeper than that. And let's be honest, that's exactly what the Fever and the league need, because her absence wasn't just about losing points or playmaking, it was losing force, losing the pace setter. The eyes on the court, national conversation dominating, what is she going to do next? Force that can tilt the league on its axis. But here's where it gets interesting. Caitlin didn't go dark during her injury. She didn't disappear. In fact, she became more present. She was vocal in huddles. She was watching film. She was working with the coaching staff. She was studying the game from the bench. That's important, because for the first time in her career, she wasn't in the action. She was around it. She had time to zoom out, to see plays develop from a coaching perspective, to listen more, talk less, and observe the game with a different lens. And when you combine that mental growth with her raw talent, you don't just get a better athlete, you get a better leader. She's learning how to manage tempo, how to communicate better, how to be a connector, not just a playmaker. In a recent interview, she said, "You don't always see everything when you're on the floor, but from the bench, you see things differently. Sometimes I notice stuff that even the coaches don't. That, right there, that's what separates stars from superstars. The great ones never stop learning. And Caitlin, she's been in the lab even while she's been out. And let's not forget what she's walking back into. The Fever are no longer the confused, clunky, early season squad that didn't know who they were. They've grown. They've battled. They've built chemistry without her. That means Caitlin now returns to a team that can run with her, not just rely on her. Kelsey Mitchell is hot again. Lexi Hull has developed into a deadly shooter. Aaliyah Boston has fully reasserted herself as a franchise cornerstone. And Aari McDonald has added another layer of quickness and chaos. Caitlin's return won't disrupt the flow. It'll elevate it. She'll bring the shooting, the spacing, the vision. But now, there's trust around her. The team knows who they are. And they've earned the right to play beside her, not behind her. So, what happens when Caitlin Clark returns to full health and a better team? Simple. Everything changes. Again, viewership will spike, ticket demand will surge, merch will fly off shelves, highlights will dominate social feeds. Every game she plays becomes an event. And not just because of what she can do, but because of what she now represents. She's not just the rookie everyone is watching. She's the standard. Her comeback could be the moment the Fever go from potential to reality. The moment the WNBA, already rising, explodes to a new level of cultural relevance. It's not just about hype anymore. It's about sustained dominance. And from the looks of it, Caitlin is ready for that next step.